Hello, I'm John Cunningham, and welcome to another episode of the RedChip Money Report. For those of you new to the show, RedChip is an investor relations, media, and research firm focused on emerging growth companies. Our unique platform combines global multimedia with traditional investor relations, reaching investors around the world. Today's show features interviews with executives of two companies. First up is 60 Degrees Pharma, stock symbol SXTP on the Nasdaq. 60 Degrees Pharma is addressing the unmet medical needs associated with infectious diseases throughout the development and commercialization of new small molecule therapeutics. They have successfully achieved regulatory approval of Arakota in malaria and are now seeking to demonstrate clinical benefit using the same regimen for COVID-19, tick-borne, and fungal diseases. We'll learn more about the company's expanding development pipeline later in the show when we speak with the CEO. Next up is Bullfrog AI, which recently IPO'd on the Nasdaq and trades under the stock symbol BFRG. Bullfrog is focused on tech-enabled drug development. Its proprietary BF Leap analytics engine is derived from technology that's been developed at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab. This powerful tool enables Bullfrog to analyze massive, complex, multifactorial data sets to enable the successful development of pharmaceuticals and biologics. This analytics tool predicts which patients will respond to therapies in development. Later, you'll see an interview with Bullfrog CEO Vin Singh, where he'll discuss Bullfrog's AI technology and how it could revolutionize drug development. Now, before we get to our first interview, our quote of the week, it comes from the book Small Stocks, Big Money. If you want to invest in the microcap space, buy companies and not stocks. If you buy stocks, the daily fluctuations and lack of liquidity will drive you crazy. These quotes come from Byron Roth, CEO of Roth Capital, featured in Chapter 7 of Small Stocks, Big Money. This is a book of exclusive interviews with some of the biggest players in the microcap space. Get a digital copy on Amazon today for just $18. Now let's get started with our first interview today with 60 Degrees Pharma.
Hello, today we have Jeff Dow, CEO, President, and Director of 60 Degrees Pharma. Jeff, great to meet you.
Craig, you too. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you today.
Jeff, please introduce to us 60 Degrees Pharma and its lead drug candidate, which is addressing that significant unmet need in COVID therapy. How did this leading drug candidate develop from your FDA-approved malarial drug, Arakota?
Craig, it's really nice to meet you, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about 60P. We're a Washington, D.C.-based pharma company focused on developing new medications to prevent and treat serious infectious diseases. We have a corporate strategy focused on reaching late-stage clinical and regulatory endpoints, and obviously a pretty important track record in having successfully gotten Arakota approved for malaria prevention back in 2018. Now, Arakota, which is our branded version of tafenoquine, was approved by FDA for malaria because it offers substantial benefits relative to other products for malaria prevention. And that's primarily a convenient dosing regimen, so it's a once a weekly administered product. And there's also no drug resistance, which simplifies the choice of which medication to take for physicians. Now, moving forward, the active ingredient of Arakota, which is tafenoquine, in a number of clinical studies and non-clinical studies, has some really intriguing data in other disease areas, which we think mean that the core molecule tafenoquine can be repositioned for new disease areas. So during the pandemic, we evaluated the approved regimen of tafenoquine, so Arakota, the first 4 doses of that in COVID patients. And what we found was in a cluster of COVID symptoms, tafenoquine accelerated clinical recovery amongst those patients that we enrolled. So moving forward, what we want to do is take that FDA-approved regimen of tafenoquine, and prove that we can accelerate the clinical recovery from COVID in a phase 2B study.
Thanks for that, Jeff. Now, let me review momentarily here. Malaria, you've got FDA approval. COVID, you're going after it right now. And I just heard you say that you may be going after other infectious diseases with this tafenoquine. Could you elaborate, please?
Yeah, sure, Craig. So just recapping briefly, our lead product, Arakota, is approved for malaria. We're going to be taking that same regimen of tafenoquine that's in Arakota. So a loading dose of 3 days and then a once weekly dosing regimen, and evaluating that for COVID in a phase 2B clinical trial. But that convenient regimen, we think, may be also very useful in other disease areas. So everyone in the northeastern United States is aware of tick-borne diseases, including Lyme disease. You may not have heard of babesiosis, which is a parasite related to malaria, but it's also transmitted by ticks in the same way that Lyme disease is. In immunosuppressed patients, babesiosis has a fatality rate of about 5% and can be chronic and really debilitating for patients. And typically what happens is those folks will go on 5 different courses of chemotherapy and not resolve their symptoms. There are a number of really exciting case reports in the literature where tafenoquine has been used on a weekly basis and has been basically the only treatment that has cured babesiosis infections. What we hope to do with collaborators in the northeastern United States in 2024 is conduct a phase 2A clinical trial in babesiosis patients to prove that tafenoquine may have or provide some clinical benefit to them. Babesiosis is an orphan disease, so there's some real advantages from a regulatory standpoint, but it's also what we refer to as a gateway indication to a much larger universe of tick-borne diseases that we think that tafenoquine may have some utility in. Separately from that, we're also focusing on candidiasis. You would have heard of Candida auris, which is a hospital-borne infection with a lot of drug resistance. We have some great non-clinical data that show that tafenoquine has an interesting mechanism of action and not any innate drug resistance associated with it. And that different mechanism of action, we think, may provide the opportunity for a clinical program around it in the future.
The addressable markets for all of these infectious diseases that you aim to treat, do you have any idea on the size of them?
Well, for COVID, we've got some pretty good idea of what the overall size of the market is based on the experience that Paxlovid, or I should say Pfizer and Merck, have had with Paxlovid and Molnupiravir. We know that those 2 products had $12 billion in revenue in 2022, but the way the FDA wrote their labels, they're only really appropriate for treating about 75% of the US population, and that's high-risk folks. For folks who have low risk of disease progression in COVID, you still don't want to get COVID and you still want to get better from COVID. But there's no FDA-approved therapies in the market. So that's why Gilead and 60P and a number of other companies are looking for new therapeutics to fill that gap. And we think that's a multi-billion-dollar unmet medical need. As it relates to malaria, our approved indication, we think there are around 500,000 prescriptions a year that our product, Arakota, could satisfy on an annual basis in the US.
Jeff, talk to us about the data that suggests that the Arakota regimen of tafenoquine for COVID can accelerate recovery.
Yeah, so we enrolled 87 patients in a clinical trial in 2021, and we compared the ability of the first 4 doses of our regimen of Arakota, so that's 2 tablets on day 1, 2, and 3, and then 2 tablets 1 week later. And what we saw was about a 2 to 2.5 day improvement in recovery from a cluster of COVID symptoms, and an overall suggestion from the data that the trend towards therapeutic benefit favored Arakota versus placebo. So what we'd like to do in our next study is basically enroll about 150 patients in a new clinical trial and test Arakota again against placebo, but specifically focusing on measuring the time to clinical recovery in patients taking Arakota versus placebo. And we expect to see a multi-day improvement in that outcome.
Aracoda, Jeff, how does it compare to existing treatments such as Paxlovid and molnupiravir?
So, Paxlovid and molnupiravir do a good job for what they're registered to do. That is, they prevent hospitalization in patients with a high risk of disease progression. But there's actually no evidence, no clinical evidence, that those products will accelerate your recovery from COVID symptoms if you don't have severe disease or you're not at high risk of disease progression. And so there's a gap there in the market that us and other companies are trying to fill with new therapeutics.
What is the strategy and what are the milestones expected as you aim to get this COVID therapy approved and to market? Also, Jeff, what is the expected timing?
So we'll be focused in 2023 on getting a phase 2b study up and running, and that will compare the approved regimen of Aracoda for malaria, but testing to see whether that same regimen can accelerate the recovery from COVID symptoms in patients with mild to moderate disease who have a lower risk of disease progression. We hope to get that study started later in 2023, enrolling our first patients before the end of the year, with the goal of completing the study in 2024.
Jeff, of course, you got Aracoda approved for malaria in 2018 and to market in 2019. What important lessons did you learn in that process?
I think it's really important to have a small, disciplined, focused team with lots of subject matter expertise and passion for the product you're moving forward. My background is in basically 25 years of drug development in malaria. I'm an expert in this particular product, Aracoda and tafenoquine, and I brought many years of experience as an Army contractor with this molecule specifically. And that subject matter expertise, and then just having a small, nimble, efficient corporate environment, I think allowed us to really focus and get the product across the line. Of course, you can't do that without funding. We had a lot of public support from the US Army, as well as backing from a Canadian pharma company, Knight Therapeutics, and a lot of room to just run with the project and make the decisions and calls we needed to make. And it was that combination of, being given the space to do it, well-resourced, and subject matter expertise that got us across the line.
Jeff, as we wrap up today, what is the essential value proposition? Why should investors take an interest in 60 Degrees Pharma right now?
Well, I think we have a lot of credibility in getting products to market. There are very few small companies who can say that with a straight face. We've done it. We've got a product with great data and a plan for new indications of both important unmet medical need for patients, but high value for investors. And we have a track record of reaching important clinical milestones very cost effectively. And it's our goal to do that again with new investors coming into the company in the future.
Now, to get more information on 60 Degrees Pharma, visit SXTPinfo.com. You'll see research reports, fact sheets, presentations, and the latest videos. It's all free. You can even subscribe to email alerts to stay on top of the latest news. You can also call 1-800-RedChip to speak to a specialist if you have any questions. We also have a free weekly newsletter you can subscribe to at redchip.com, featuring emerging growth companies like 60 Degree Pharma. Now let's move on to our next interview today with Bullfrog AI.
We're here today with Vin Singh, the founder and CEO of Bullfrog AI, stock symbol BFRG. Welcome to sunny Florida. Welcome to the studio, Vin.
Thanks, Todd. Great to be here.
I really want to congratulate you. You had an IPO recently, Nasdaq listing, and that's always a very exciting time.
Yeah, it's a great moment, a milestone for our company, and we're excited about the future.
AI is one of the hottest things going right now. It's all over the news. I guess since ChatGPT came out, it's really been getting a lot of juice. Why don't you tell us a little history about your AI
So our AI comes from the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab, and that's one of the top institutions in the world, extremely innovative. They work on lots of amazing technologies. They spent a lot of time and money developing this AI platform. It's actually won awards there for Innovation of the Year. And it has an amazing ability to predict targets of interest in large, complex data sets. It's, in some ways, it's similar to what ChatGPT is. ChatGPT is what you call generative AI. And that means you're generating new content from existing content. So when you hear stories about ChatGPT being used to create, a new article or write a book, publish a book, in our technology, it's a similar approach. We take data, clinical data, real-world data, and we're able to generate new data, which are relational databases or relational networks. So we take that existing data, create these networks, and we can show relationships that were previously unknown.
The Johns Hopkins University is clearly an amazing partner to have in medical breakthroughs, and obviously the APL is doing all types of things. Maybe how did you get involved with them to begin with? That's just a little history.
I had a relationship with Johns Hopkins. I actually did my MBA there. Okay. And then learned about APL, which is a subsidiary of Johns Hopkins. And the reason I even started the company was I was looking for a tool that could help improve the odds of success in late-stage clinical development, because as you may or may not know, big pharma fails about 50% of the time in phase 3. Wow. And I thought, wow, that's a really big number. And for oncology and cardiovascular and CNS, that number is even higher. So, it just so happens that APL had a solution, and we were able to get worldwide exclusive rights to that solution for drug development applications.
Wow, that's an amazing feat for a relatively small company. I know you've only got about a little under 6 million shares outstanding, so very exciting time for you guys. You've got a couple of drugs already in the pipeline. In fact, one came out of the Johns Hopkins University. One of the programs already has some clinical data. Why don't you just give us a breakdown of your drug pipeline?
We do have a drug for glioblastoma, which is a very aggressive type of brain cancer. Johns Hopkins took the drug through a phase 1 trial, and it was successful, really looking for safety, but there were hints of other possibilities as well. And this was in newly diagnosed patients with glioblastoma. It was also tested on pediatric patients as well. So that was a phase 1. We also have another drug, also for glioblastoma from Johns Hopkins, that's related to this first drug. So right now we're in the process of developing our strategy for how best to move forward with these 2 programs, right? Because we want to do what makes the most sense for our company and for patients, right? We want to be successful. And we're going to be looking to partner this program. And, we come to the table with the drug and our technology, and the partner would come to the table with resources and clinical experience. And our objective, like everything we do, is to advance this drug one stage and then flip it to big pharma. So that's really what our business model is. The second program is a discovery program we recently announced with the J. Craig Venter Institute. And that's where we are using our technology to effectively reprogram a herpes virus to attack colorectal cancer cells. So we're basically taking the genome from a herpes virus and swapping out pieces of it to find the optimal combination so that these herpes virus particles actually go after a colorectal and attack the colorectal cancer cells without harming healthy cells or having off-target effects. So that's a really exciting discovery phase project. And again, our objective here is to take this program, advance it one stage, and then partner it. And we're going to keep repeating that cycle.
Sounds amazing. That sounds like something out of the Born Identity or something. So next level technology for sure. Could your AI, you think, give that program a better chance? How would that work?
Well, absolutely. I mean, because this is a very complicated problem that we're trying to solve. So when you have very large data sets, complex data sets, and you're trying to make predictions, which is what we're doing here. We're trying to predict which combination of genes is going to allow this reprogrammed herpes virus to do what it wanted to do. You need a technology like AI, machine learning, to achieve that.
What do you think is causing all this fervor and excitement around AI in the market?
Well, I think AI is starting to mature. Hearing about ChatGPT and all the amazing applications, I mean, that's brought it to the consumer. Everybody can now get access to AI. And as we continue seeing success stories and the value it can add, making people's lives easier, more efficient, and that's no different in healthcare. We're seeing AI being applied in drug discovery, imaging, the things that we're doing, which are discovery all the way to clinical development. As we keep hearing success stories about AI, I think people are getting more and more excited about it, and it's just proving itself to be a very valuable tool with tremendous potential.
How do you think your algorithms might separate you apart from, let's just say your traditional, there's a lot of biotech AIs out there?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that. We think that most AI companies in the healthcare biotech space are using open source algorithms. Our algorithms are proprietary. They were developed at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab. And a paper was published where our algorithms went head-to-head against the other open source algorithms that are being used today, where about a dozen different data sets were analyzed. Our algorithms came out on top for speed and accuracy. So we know that we have something special that appears to be better than what others are using today, and we think that gives us an advantage. And it's not something you see very often where a company is publishing head-to-head against the competition. So I think that's giving us a lot of confidence, a lot of optimism, and it's a objective proof point that you can't debate it. The data's there. APL has more than 6,000 engineers and scientists. They develop all kinds of amazing technologies related to national defense, space exploration, robotics, things like that. Our platform won Innovation of the Year at APL, and that's a big deal. So we're coming from real quality. The core of our company is real quality.
Vin, what is the, why don't you bring it home for the audience today? What is the essential value proposition? Why should our audience consider investing in Bullfrog AI today?
We are a tech-enabled drug development company. So we're an AI company applying our technology to the problems in drug development. Our value proposition is this. Drug development is a very long and expensive and high-risk project. Okay, you're talking about 10 to 15 years, $1 to $2 billion. We believe we can increase the chances for success.
Now to get more information on Bullfrog AI, visit bfrginfo.com. You'll see research reports, fact sheets, presentations, and the latest videos. It's all free. You can even subscribe to email alerts to stay on top of the latest news. You can also call 1-800-RedChip to speak to a specialist if you have any questions. We also have a free weekly newsletter you can subscribe to at redchip.com, featuring emerging growth companies like Bullfrog AI. In addition to our newsletter, you can also order your copy of Small Stocks, Big Money. This is a book written by RedChip CEO, featuring interviews with some of the biggest players in the microcap space. Order your copy at Amazon.com today for just $18. Now let's recap the companies you met today. First, you met 60 Degrees Pharma, stock symbol SXTP on the Nasdaq. 60 Degrees Pharma is implementing clinical research programs to evaluate the utility of its Ericoda regime for tafenoquine for non-malaria disease indications with an upcoming planned Phase 2B clinical trial in low-risk COVID-19 patients, expected to begin in 2023 and a second study to follow in 2024. Arakota is FDA approved as a malaria preventative treatment and has been on the market since late 2019. This solid foundation provides 60 Degrees Pharma a cost-effective path to new indications that capitalizes on existing research to reduce costs and risks. Then you met Bullfrog AI, stock symbol BFRG on the Nasdaq. The average cost of a new drug is $2.6 billion, and it typically takes over 8 years before it will reach the market. Bullfrog is deploying its proprietary BF Leap platform for use at several critical stages of development. The intention is to streamline data analytics and lower the overall development costs for new therapeutics by decreasing failure rates and potentially impacting the lives of countless patients that may have otherwise not received the therapies they need. Again, to learn more about Bullfrog AI, visit bfrginfo.com. Again, if you have any questions about any of the companies featured on today's show, call us at 1-800-REDCHIP or email us at info@redchip.com. In closing, remember, while small caps can provide significant gains, you must be prepared for the downside. Small cap stocks are among the most volatile asset class. Some of the companies featured on this show are RedChip client companies, and we may own stock in these companies. So please always read our disclosures at redchip.com.